Mara had always been a quiet woman, not the kind of quiet that made people uncomfortable, the kind that made a room feel calmer just because she was in it. She had soft brown eyes, steady hands, and the sort of patience that only comes from someone who has learned to carry things alone. She had been the mate of Alpha King Kayden Voss for 2 years before the night everything changed. It happened in winter. The roads were covered in ice, and the storm had come in faster than anyone expected. Mara had been driving back from visiting a sick woman in the outer village. She had always insisted on helping the healers, even when Kayden told her she did not have to. That was just who she was. The bridge was old, the ice was thick, and the car went over the edge before she had any time to think. The river was freezing cold and moving fast. Mara remembered the water. She remembered the dark. She remembered trying to hold on to something, anything, as the current pulled her downstream, and then she remembered nothing for a very long time. When she woke up, she was lying in a warm bed with a fire burning beside her. A woman with gray hair and gentle eyes was sitting nearby, watching her. The woman's name was Berta, and she was the head healer of a border pack, a smaller, peaceful group of people who lived far from the large pack territories. Mara had been found on the riverbank by a patrol wolf named Dax. He had carried her to safety and brought her to Berta, who had worked through the night to keep her alive. For 3 weeks, Mara did not know her own name. The memory loss was not permanent, the healer told her, but it was serious. Mara drifted in and out of sleep for days, and when she finally woke up with clear eyes, the first thing she felt was a strange, hollow ache in her chest, like something important was missing, but she could not yet say what. Her memories came back slowly, her childhood, her mother's voice, the feel of morning light through her bedroom window, and then, gradually, more painful things, her life with Kayden, the way he looked at her across a crowded room, the warmth of belonging to someone, and being known. But along with those memories came others. The announcement she had heard, through Berta, through whispers from pack visitors, that the Alpha King had declared his Luna dead after 2 weeks of searching, that the body had not been found, but the evidence was enough, that Kayden Voss had already begun preparations for a political alliance with another pack, one that would require him to take a new mate. Mara had lain in that bed for a long time after hearing that. She had stared at the ceiling and felt the information settle into her bones like cold water. He had moved on. She was carrying his child. She had found that out 3 days after her memories returned, and the man who was the father had already let her go. She made her decision quietly, the way she made most decisions. She would not go back. She would not appear at the gates of his pack like a ghost returned from the river, asking for a place that had already been given to someone else. She had survived. That would have to be enough. The alpha of the border pack was a man named Dorian Hayes. He was broad-shouldered and serious, with kind eyes and a calm way of speaking that reminded Mara, in some distant way, of safety. He was not like Kayden. He was not dramatic or powerful in the way that filled a room. He was simply steady. When he learned that Mara was pregnant and alone, he did not ask many questions. He offered her a place to stay, work if she wanted it, and the protection of his pack. He did not offer her anything she did not ask for. That, more than anything, made her trust him. Her son was born on a Tuesday in March, just before sunrise. He came into the world quietly, which surprised everyone, because from the moment he could walk and talk, Eli was anything but quiet. He was 4 years old when all of it came apart. Eli had his mother's soft brown eyes and his father's exact stubbornness, though Mara did not think about that very often. He was bright and curious, and completely fearless in the way that only young children can be. He collected beetles and kept them in a jar beside his bed. He asked questions about everything. He made friends with every single person in the pack within his first week of being old enough to wander on his own. And he loved Dorian. It had happened the way these things do, slowly, without anyone planning it. Dorian had been there when Eli scraped his knee the first time. He had been there for the first bad dream. He had sat with Eli during the long summer evenings and taught him the names of birds. And one morning, without any ceremony at all, Eli had called him father, and Dorian had gone very still, and then nodded once, and that was that. Mara had watched it happen and felt 2 things at the same time: a quiet, warm gratitude, and a sadness she kept tucked away somewhere she did not visit often. The Interpack Summit was held every 5 years. It was a formal gathering where the major alphas of the region came together to discuss boundaries, trade agreements, and matters of shared concern. Dorian had hosted it twice before. This time, the gathering was to be held on his territory again, and it was a large event, 20 alphas and their advisors, arriving over the course of 2 days. Mara had known about it for months. She had arranged her schedule carefully. She would work the early morning shift at the healer's cottage and stay on the far east side of the pack grounds during the summit days. Eli would stay with their neighbor, a warm woman named Greta, who made excellent soup and had a garden that Eli loved. She had planned everything. She had been careful. She had thought about every possible scenario. She had not planned for Eli. On the second morning of the summit, while Greta was hanging laundry in the garden, Eli spotted a beetle on the fence post near the front gate. He followed it. The beetle moved toward the main gathering grounds. Eli followed the beetle, and by the time Greta realized he was gone, Eli had already found his way to the large open field, where Dorian was standing with a group of alphas, speaking quietly about boundary agreements. Eli pushed through the edge of the crowd without hesitation, reached Dorian's side, and pulled on his sleeve with great energy. His voice was loud and clear and entirely happy. "Father! Father, look! I found a beetle! Father, can I stay? I want to sit with you. Father." The clearing did not go quiet all at once. It went quiet in a wave, starting with the people nearest to Eli, then spreading outward as heads turned and conversation stopped. Caden Voss stood 10 feet away. He had not moved in several seconds. He was a tall man, dressed simply, with the kind of face that did not give much away under normal circumstances. But in that moment, something moved through him that he could not have hidden if he had tried. The boy's scent reached him like a hand pressed flat against his chest. He knew it instantly, not because he had met the child before, because the recognition was not something he had to think about. It was something older and deeper than thought. It ran through him from the ground up. That was his blood. He did not say anything. He did not make a scene. He was a king, and he had spent years learning how to hold things inside without showing them on his face. But Dorian had been watching from the corner of his eye, and he saw. And when Caden met his gaze across the gathering, Dorian gave a single, small nod. He had always known this day might come. The summit continued. Eli was gently collected by Dax, who had learned over 4 years that his job now included child retrieval. The meetings went on. People talked about boundaries and trade, and the weather patterns affecting the northern packs. Caden sat through all of it. That evening, after the formal meetings had ended, and most of the visiting alphas had returned to their guest quarters, Caden found Dorian by the fire at the edge of the grounds. He sat down across from him without being invited. He did not waste time. "Who is the boy's mother?" he asked. Dorian looked at him for a moment. He considered, briefly, whether there was any version of this conversation where he could avoid telling the truth. He found there was not. He said her name. Caden was very still for a long time. Then he stood, thanked Dorian quietly, and walked toward the healer's cottage on the east side of the grounds. Mara heard his footsteps on the path before she saw him. She had always been able to hear things most people missed. She was standing in the doorway of the cottage when he appeared at the end of the path, and for a moment, neither of them moved. She looked exactly as he remembered her, a little more tired around the eyes perhaps, a little more certain in the way she held herself, but her. He stopped a few feet away. He looked at her, the way a person looks at something they have been trying not to think about for 3 years. "You're alive," he said. His voice was very quiet. "You declared me dead," she said. Hers was quieter. They stood there in the evening air, with 3 years of silence between them. She told him everything: the river, the rescue, the weeks without memory. She told him about waking up and finding herself whole but lost, in a place she did not recognize, with people she did not know. She told him about the moment her memories returned, and the moment, shortly after, when she learned that he had already held a formal mourning ceremony and announced a new political arrangement within weeks of her disappearance. She told him she had taken that as her answer. Caden listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he told her the truth about those weeks, something he had never told anyone. He told her that the mourning ceremony had been his council's idea, not his. That the political alliance had been pressure applied to a man who was barely holding himself together. That his way of grieving had been to lock it down, make it orderly, make it survivable. That he had not known how to be broken in front of people, so he had looked like a man who had moved on, when the truth was that he had simply stopped. She listened to this without looking away. They were both quiet after that. It was not an easy conversation, it did not fix anything in one evening, but it was honest, and for the first time in 3 years, they were standing in the same space with no walls between them. Only the truth, which was harder and more complicated and more real than either of them had expected. Caden asked, near the end of that first evening, if he could meet Eli. Mara thought about it for a long moment, then she nodded. She brought Eli out onto the front step of the cottage. The boy was in his sleep clothes, a little rumpled, carrying his beetle jar under one arm. He looked up at the tall, serious man standing in front of him with the complete confidence of a child who has never had reason to be afraid of strangers. He stared. He sniffed the air once, the way children in the pack always did, naturally, without thinking. And then his expression changed into something thoughtful. "You smell like me," he said. Caden crouched down slowly until he was at the boy's level. Something in his face shifted. The tightness that had lived there for years loosened, just slightly. When he spoke, he did not use his alpha voice, or his king's voice, or any of the voices he had trained himself to use over years of leading people. He used the only voice he had left that was still completely his. "I think I do," he said. Eli considered this very seriously, the way he considered most important things. He looked at the beetle jar, then back at Caden. Then he said, "My father is Dorian, but you can come to my birthday, it's in March." Mara, standing in the doorway, pressed her hand once against the side of the door frame to steady herself. Caden looked up at her over Eli's head. His eyes said everything that he had not yet found words for. He looked back at the boy. "I'll be there," he said. The road forward was not simple, and no one pretended it was. Caden had a formal political arrangement with another pack that had to be carefully and respectfully ended, a process that cost him 2 alliances and a great deal of political standing. He let it cost him. He did not hesitate. Mara did not rush. She had spent 3 years building something steady, a life, a home, a sense of herself that did not depend on anyone else for its foundation. She was not going to dismantle that quickly, and she did not need to. She told Caden that she wanted to know who he was now, not who he had been. That she needed time, not promises. He gave her time. Dorian stepped back with grace. He had always known, somewhere beneath the surface, that what he had offered Mara was a shelter, not a destination. He remained in Eli's life, not as father anymore, but as something Eli named himself, in his own time, Uncle Dory, which Dorian accepted with a quiet smile and no argument. Caden came to the birthday in March. He sat at the long table with the rest of the pack and ate cake and watched Eli explain, in great detail, the differences between 3 types of beetles. He stayed until Eli fell asleep on the bench with his head on Mara's arm, and then he helped carry the boy inside, carefully, so as not to wake him. He and Mara stood in the small hallway afterward, in the quiet of the cottage, and neither of them said anything for a while. Then Mara looked at him and said, simply, "Next week. Come for dinner." He came for dinner the next week, and the week after that. And slowly, the way rivers find their way back to the sea after a long detour, they found their way back to each other, not the same as before, because neither of them was the same, but true, honest, real. The evening Mara finally came home, back to the pack, back to him. Eli was asleep in the back seat of the car, his beetle jar held loosely in one small hand. Caden lifted him out carefully, carried him up the steps, and laid him down without waking him. He stood in the doorway of the boy's room for a moment, in the dark, just listening to him breathe. And for the first time in 3 years, there was no tightness in his chest. There was no locked door somewhere inside him, holding grief he had never allowed himself to feel. There was only the quiet, and the boy sleeping, and Mara standing at the end of the hall, alive and home, and looking at him, like she had made her decision. He had made his too, a long time ago, by a river in winter, even if he had not known it. Some things do not break, no matter how long they are buried. They simply wait, patient and quiet, for the people who belong to them to finally find their way back.